Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the two titans of management theory. One was an architect who designed the entire organization from the top down. The other? He was a scientist, perfecting every single movement from the bottom up. And believe it or not, their competing visions still shape how pretty much every modern organization is run. So, to really get management, you've got to ask yourself a basic question. Is it all about the big picture, about orchestrating the whole organization like a grand blueprint? Or is it about sweating the small stuff, perfecting every single task and optimizing every last movement on the factory floor? So here's our game plan. We'll start with what these principles even are, then we'll meet our architect and our scientist. After that, we'll see how their big ideas clash, and finally, we'll see how their combined legacy is still a huge deal today. Okay, so before we jump in and meet our two main guys, what in the world is a management principle anyway? The best way to think about them is as a kind of compass, not a GPS. They're general guidelines, these fundamental truths that help managers make tough calls. They're definitely not a rigid rulebook or some ready-made solution you can just plug in. So our story really boils down to these two key figures, and they could not have been more different. You've got Henri Fayol, the architect of big picture administration, and then you have F.W. Taylor, the scientist who was absolutely obsessed with worker productivity. All right, let's kick things off with Henri Fayol. He was the guy looking at the whole puzzle of management from the top down, from the executive suite, thinking about the entire organization. Now, Fayol wasn't just some academic in an ivory tower. No way. This guy was a French mining engineer. He was in the trenches. He took decades of his real-world experience and boiled it all down into 14 universal principles for managing an entire company. It's a framework we now call classical management theory. We're not going to slog through all 14 principles today, but if we look at just a few of them, you get a really clear picture of his top-down philosophy. First up is the division of work. He argued that if you break down complex jobs into smaller, more focused tasks, people naturally become specialists. And when they're specialists, they get way more efficient and can produce more without even trying harder. Makes sense, right? Have you ever had two different bosses telling you to do two conflicting things at once? It's chaos. Well, Fayol's unity of command principle was designed to stop exactly that. His rule was simple. Every employee should answer to one and only one direct boss. And this one really shows his focus on harmony in the workplace. He called it esprit de corps, which is just a fancy French way of saying team spirit. He believed managers had to actively build a sense of unity, of turning I into we, to create a really strong, tight-knit team. Okay, so that's the view from the boardroom. Now, let's completely flip the script and head down to the factory floor with F.W. Taylor. This is a whole different ballgame. Taylor was an American mechanical engineer, and to put it lightly, the man was obsessed with efficiency. He truly believed that for any job at all, there was one best way to do it, and he was determined to find it by applying the scientific method to everything. His whole mantra could be summed up in 4 words: science, not rule of thumb. He wanted to get rid of all the guesswork, the intuition, that this is just how we've always done it kind of thinking. He wanted to replace all that with hard data and analysis. So to find that one best way, he developed this super detailed 4-part technique called work study. First, he'd analyze the method to find the best process. Then he'd do a motion study to get rid of any wasted movements. Next came a time study to set a precise standard for how long the job should take. He even did a fatigue study to figure out the perfect amount of rest time. It was a complete science of work. Now, to make sure this hyper-scientific approach was actually followed, he came up with a pretty radical idea called functional foremanship. Get this. He thought workers should have 8 different specialist bosses, each one overseeing a different part of their job. You can probably see how this directly blows up Fayol's whole unity of command idea. So we've got 2 incredibly powerful but totally different ways of thinking about management. Let's put them head to head and really see how they stack up. So here's the bottom line. Fayol was focused on the big picture, improving the entire administration for the top-level managers. His theory was meant to be universal. Taylor, on the other hand, was down in the weeds, trying to squeeze every last drop of productivity out of the workers on the shop floor. And yeah, where Fayol said 1 boss, Taylor said, how about 8? So, who was right? Was it the architect with his grand blueprint or the scientist with his microscope? Well, here's the twist. It's not really about who was right or wrong. The reality is, their ideas aren't really at odds with each other. They're actually complementary. Think of them as two sides of the very same coin. You see, any successful organization needs both. You absolutely need Fayol's big picture administrative clarity to give everyone structure and direction, but you also need Taylor's detail-oriented focus on efficiency to make sure the actual work gets done in the best way possible. A great strategy is useless without efficient teams, and efficient teams are lost without a clear strategy.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought for you. In your own job, or maybe in your studies, which approach do you see making the biggest impact? Is it the grand vision of the architect or the precise calculations of the scientist? It's a question that still defines the modern workplace. Thanks for joining us.